What?
Ah.
What was that again? Haven't you told me, more than once, that your ears work just fine? Ezra snapped. Then he sighed.
Ah.
Hell. I'm sorry. Look, I'm being a bastard and I know it. I'm sorry. I'm just hearing the soft, quiet sound of her footsteps. He glanced up, watched as she moved toward him. Maybe my ears don't work as well as I thought, she said, her face unreadable. Lena, she knelt in front him. He could see the vague blur of his reflection, distorted by the glasses she hid behind. Reaching up, he pulled them off and set them aside. I hate these things, you know, he said quietly. I get tired of people looking at me. The glasses don't make them not look, he whispered. Catching her face in his hands, he pressed his lips to one eye, then the other. People are either fucked up, stupid, cruel, or curious. Wearing the glasses doesn't change that. It just gives you something to hide behind. She wrapped her fingers around his wrists. Nice, subtle way to distract me. But I asked you a question. What did you say? The words were trapped in his throat. They didn't want to come out. It had been easier, he realized, bellowing it out in a fit of temper and worry. But now, with her so close, and that soft, almost wondering look in her eyes, his heart did a strange little skipping thing in his chest and he leaned in, pressed his lips to hers. I think I'm falling in love with you. I didn't want this, I sure as hell didn't plan this, but it's there anyway and damn it, Lena, it would kill me if something happened to you. She sighed against his mouth and he caught her lower lip between his teeth, nipped on it gently. As she opened for him, he wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her into his lap. She hadn't pulled away. Hadn't shoved his ass out the door. That counted for something. Clumsy delivery aside, it counted, right? You've known me for 5 weeks, Ezra. 5 weeks. And you admitted it yourself not that long ago, you just came through a really, really bad experience, she said quietly, cupping his face in her hands. How can you think you love me? He laid a hand on her heart. I think I started to fall in love with you that first night. You blushed when I called you beautiful, and then you shared your food with me. You got so nervous when I asked you for a date and I was scared as hell you would say no. Smoothing his hand up, he rested it on her neck, used his thumb to angle her chin up. I started to fall for you that night, Lena. I guess it's why I backed away, maybe I didn't think I could handle it. And what makes you think you can handle it now? Oh, I'm pretty sure I can't. But then again, if I wait until I can handle things, then I never would do anything, he murmured, rubbing his lips against hers. Things happen when they happen, not when you're ready for them. She sighed against his mouth, a smile curling her lips. That sounds kind of, well, romantic, Ezra. Never would have thought it of you. Lifting his head, he smiled at her. Oh, I can get plenty romantic. Slipping his hands under her tunic, he caught her breasts in his hands, stroking her through the silk and lace. She made a purring sound low in her throat, a sound that had the blood draining out of his head, straight to his cock. I want you naked, he muttered. Lover, that's not romance. Is this your way of distracting me? Ezra scowled, lifting his head. Hell, no. I pretty much always want you naked. And why should I try to distract you? Then he trailed a hand down her torso, cupped his hand over the heat of her sex. Through the cotton of her trousers and her panties, he could feel her. He stroked her through the material, smiling as her body shuddered. A glassy, dazed look entered her eyes and he shifted her around so that she sat on his lap, her back against his chest. He touched her again, this time pushing his hand inside her trousers, inside the flimsy barrier of her panties. She was slick, swollen, and when he pushed a finger inside her, she bucked against him. "I want you," he whispered, raking his teeth down her neck. "I don't see a day going by when I won't want you." Ezra, he used his free hand to guide her face around, catching her mouth with his. He had wicked hands, Lena decided. Wicked. And his mouth was just as bad. They'd been arguing, just minutes ago, she thought. And now he had two fingers moving in and out of her pussy, one thumb rotating against her clit, and he was kissing her, like he was dying for her, starving for her. Need nodded her middle and she braced her hands against his legs, her nails biting into the sturdy material of his jeans. As the orgasm bowed her back and tore through her body, she whimpered his name. She was still shuddering, still shaking when she drifted back to earth a few seconds later. And still sitting on Ezra's lap, her legs spread as much as her trousers would allow, with his hand between her thighs, still cupped over her sex. A firm, possessive touch. He had his free arm wrapped around her waist, holding her close. The length of his cock was pressed against her butt, throbbing and insistent, but he made no other move. All he did was hold her close. Head spinning, Lena whispered, "I think we've both gone crazy." "It's possible." She shifted and squirmed until he let her go. Rising, she straightened her pants and then returned to him, curling up on his lap, taking care not to put too much weight on his right leg. Carefully, she rested a hand on it, wincing as she felt the muscles knot under her touch. "I hurt your leg. I'll live." Pressing her face against his neck, she sighed and breathed him in. Man, she loved how he smelled. Warm, strong, male. Like sun, wood, grass, and heat. Like Ezra, she guessed. It was something that was uniquely him. "Did you mean it?" she asked, tracing the tip of her finger in a pattern on his chest. "I'm not much in the habit of saying something unless I mean it, babe," he said, sighing. "This is crazy, you know. How can you know me well enough to love me?" "Lena." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I know what I need to know. I know that your laugh makes me want to smile, and I know that when you're sad, it bothers me. I know I love to watch you, I know you blush when you realize I've been staring at you, even though it makes you smile, too." He combed a hand through her hair, angled her head, and bussed her mouth with his. "I may not know everything there is to know about you, Lena, but I do know I'd like to spend my life learning the things I don't know." Her heart was racing, she realized. Racing, dancing, skipping, and doing all sorts of other things the heart just wasn't supposed to do. Taking a deep, slow breath, she said, "Okay, so maybe you do know me." "Somewhat. And maybe I know you." "Somewhat. But we've only known each other a few weeks." "Doesn't matter. I don't know if I believe in fate and all that crap, but I do know the only time I've ever felt this complete in my life is when I'm with you." He hooked his hand around her neck and pressed his brow to hers. "I'm not going to rush things, it's not like there isn't enough insanity going on around us, anyway." Insanity. Yes. Things were mildly insane right now. Mildly insane. Majorly insane. Screams. Dead women. Somebody trying to frame law. A sexy state cop thought he might be in love with her. Lena wasn't entirely certain, but she was starting to think she might be in love with the sexy state cop, too. Rubbing her cheek against his shoulder, she said, I kind of like having you around, Ezra. I think I like it a lot. His laugh was dry, self-deprecating. You know how to stroke a guy's ego, gorgeous, you know that? I tell you I think I might be falling in love with you and you tell me you like having me hang around. Your ego doesn't need stroking. Slipping her arms around his neck, she said, slow. We need to go slow with this, because it's majorly unfamiliar territory for me. But, well, even with the mind-blowing sex, if I didn't have feelings for you, what you're telling me would have me so freaked out, I'd be all but shoving you out the door. But you're still here. Does that count for anything? He nipped her chin. For now.
Yeah.
Then he sighed. You still insist on going to work? Yes. Shit. Nudging her off his lap, he said, fine. I'm driving you. I'm picking you up. If anybody says one wrong thing to you, tell Puck to eat him. A smile tugged at her mouth. You bet. And stop humoring me. She wiped the smile off her face. You bet. Sighing, he brushed her hair back from her face. You're a smartass, Lena Riddle. You bet. Leaning in, she pressed a kiss to the corner of his mouth. Relax. The inn's always got plenty of people around. And I'll have Puck with me. It's not likely anybody would mess with me with him around. Scuffing his shoes along the sidewalk, Brody tried not to think about the argument with his dad and Uncle Remy. He wanted a cigarette. Needed it. But he couldn't get his hands on any cigarettes and none of the guys who would usually buy them for him would do it now. Curling his lip, he wondered if his uncle had gotten a hold of them. He might have thought it was his dad, but he knew better. The only time his dad cared about him was when Brody was causing trouble. Hunching his shoulders, he tried to block out the memory of their voices. His dad's raised, Remy's soft, and low, as though he realized it was all the more effective for not yelling. The worst of it, though, was that look in his dad's eyes. The look that made him wonder if maybe his dad did still care. That sad, heavy weight. The disappointment. Probably wished Brody had been the one to die instead of Mom. Brody wished it, too. Ever since she died, things had been different. Real different. His dad, man, he was hardly ever home. Gone all day, sometimes half the night. It was as though there were two strangers living in their house, not father and son. There were days when his dad couldn't even look at him. A familiar engine caught his ears and he looked, watched as an old white Ford work truck rumbled down Main Street. Ezra King. That ugly, dark rage took root inside him. Uncle Remy was good and pissed at him all over a bunch of fucking flowers. Bastard. Paranoia was bad anywhere. A drive into town proved that, actually, Ezra wasn't as paranoid as he thought he was. He was actually doing just fine. These people? They were paranoid. It was ugly. It was bad. Bad for business, unless you owned a hardware store or sold guns. It was bad for customer relations, as evidenced by the constant sniping that led to a catfight breaking out between two ladies at the community bank on Main Street. It might have been amusing, except the ladies were in their 60s and one of them had possibly broken her hip when she fell. Paranoia, in under a week, had turned the small, tidy little town of Ash into a freaking nightmare. Ezra climbed out of his truck and watched his eyes slit his way, danced off to the side the minute he made eye contact, only to lock on his back as he headed into the cafe. It was Thursday afternoon and he was hungrier than hell. The cafe was his best bet, unless he wanted to trek out to the inn, and even though he and Lena had made up after their argument, he figured it would be better if she didn't feel he was hanging around her every step. He was tempted, though. In jail already. Just don't understand. No proof. Everything has to have proof these days. A shame, that's what it is. Ezra was careful not to turn his head and look, although he didn't need to. He wasn't hearing anything he hadn't heard before over the past week. Half the town was ready to lynch Law. Even though he hadn't been there. Shit, what would they have done if Law had been around? No fucking telling. His appetite faded and a lead weight settled in his gut, but Ezra didn't get up. Law wasn't coming into town much and neither was Lena. Ezra wasn't quite settled into town life just yet, so if he wanted to hear gossip, he had to do it the old-fashioned way. Eavesdrop. What more proof does he need? They found the body. I heard she was violated. Ezra curled his lip. Violated. That was such a civilized word for what had been done to that girl. Prettied it up, sounded so much nicer than raped. Assaulted. Sodomized. Beaten. What can I get you? Lifting his head, he met the curious gaze of the teenaged waitress. She paled, and backed up a step. Taking a deep breath, he blanked his expression and gave her a weak, lopsided smile. Sorry. I was distracted there. Just give me whatever is up for the lunch special. Not like it mattered. Whatever they served him, it would taste like sawdust, it would go down like sawdust, and it would sit in his stomach like sawdust mixed with lead for the next few hours. As she walked off, he tugged the phone off his belt and studied the time. It was just after 4. He had a good 4 hours before he could head out to the inn, and another 6 hours before he could hustle Lena out of there, take her back to her house and get her naked, get her into bed, and make love to her. Wrapped in her arms, he could maybe get some sleep, forget about the ache in his head, the weight on his shoulders, and the unsolved mystery of a dead girl's body. A dead girl who still had no name. We have a name, Nielsen said quietly, addressing the few men he'd selected to help work this team. There was some sort of computer error, otherwise we would have had a name before now. This woman's been listed as a missing person for the past 3 weeks. He was keeping it close and tight, one screw-up, that was all it would take for somebody to try to get this away from him. But the memory of that girl's face. Focus, man. Focus. The job. We have a name, he said again. Jolene Hollister, aged 29. Engaged to be married. She disappeared 21 days ago from Cherokee Park in Louisville, Kentucky. She'd gone there to go running, her car, her purse, her keys were all found there by her fiancé, who reported her missing. I'm still trying to contact her next of kin. Her only family is a cousin, out of the country. He took a picture of Jolene from the folder he held and studied it. Young. Pretty. She looked like she had her whole life ahead of her. She'd only had months. Setting his jaw, he pinned the image of her smiling face up on the board, next to one of the images taken at the scene. It was almost obscene, the difference between the two. Obscene. There was something else about her that bothered him, but he wasn't quite ready to discuss that with anybody yet. Wasn't sure if anybody besides him had noticed. Turning back, he studied the faces of his men. Sadly, one of those faces was Prather. He hadn't had much choice. If he didn't let Prather in, considering Prather had found her, it was going to cause problems. Nielsen just hoped letting the fool in didn't prove to be more of a problem. So, Let's see what we can do to help find some justice for Miss Jolene, he said, turning away from the image of her smiling hazel eyes. Shit, business had better pick up, Roz muttered. Lena rotated her neck, wincing a little at the stiffness there. It will. Give it a few more days. She grimaced. This is unusual for Ash. Only type of violence people see around here is the occasional bar fight or a drunk driving accident every now and then. Don't forget about Pete Hamilton. Lena scowled. Shit. Why not? I say we throw that bastard in a dark hole filled with rats and forget completely about him. Until he's nothing but bone. Oh, gory image. Nice. Sorry. She finished wiping down the counter and said, bastards who knock their wives around set me off. She washed her hands and turned back to face Roz. I heard the daughter saw it all. That's what I heard, too. Word is Remy Jennings is planning on putting that bastard behind bars for a good long while. A smile tugged at Lena's lips. If anybody can, Remy can do it. He was sharp, determined, and focused. She'd admired that about him, respected it. So, think he might have any idea on who else he might be putting behind bars? Roz's attempt at subtlety fell flat. Shoving off the counter, Lena tucked her hands into her pockets and balled them into fists. Meaning, who? Long, awkward, awful minutes of silence passed. Lena, you know who. You actually think Law could have killed somebody? Well, no. But, Lena, the body was found at his house, Roz said.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there. You're sure about that? Lena opened her mouth, closed it because she wasn't sure she could say anything coherent, except a long, nasty stream of swear words. Finally, she managed to say, what do you mean, am I sure about that? Hell, yes, I'm sure. He wasn't even in town, and besides, it's Law. He wouldn't ever do that to a woman. I don't want to think he would either, Roz murmured. But Lena heard the doubt. And it twisted her stomach and made her see red. Then you don't think it, Roz. If you believe in him, if he is your friend, it shouldn't be that fucking hard. Lena, he is, but, Roz's voice trailed off. An awkward silence fell between them. As the knot in her gut twisted tighter and tighter, Lena finally shoved away from the counter. Under her breath, she muttered, fuck it. Lena, I want to believe in him, too, you know. And if you're sure he was out of town, Roz? Do me a favor and be quiet, Lena said. She made her way around the kitchen until she reached one of her cabinets. The rum she kept in there was generally just used for baking, but right then, she didn't care. She pulled the bottle down and got herself a Diet Coke and some ice. Yes, Roz. I'm sure he was out of town, attending the funeral of a friend. He wasn't anywhere in the state, so yes, I am sure. Lena, don't be mad. He's my friend, too, don't, Lena said quietly, her voice trembling just a little with rage. She set the glass down. Carefully. Very carefully. Because she was tempted to slam it down, just to hear the glass shatter. Curling her fingers around the edge of the cool marble countertop, she said again, don't, Roz. Don't stand there and tell me that he's your friend right after you ask me if I'm sure he didn't brutally rape and murder some woman. You don't have the right to call him a friend. Abruptly, she yanked her tunic off and grabbed her phone from her pocket. I'm going home. She dialed Ezra's number, ignoring Roz's stammering voice as he came on the line. Hey, I'm done here. How soon can you be here? 5 minutes, actually. I was already on my way. I had planned to get a bite to eat. I'll make you something at my place, Lena said. She had to get out of there before she exploded. All night, she thought, steaming. All night, she had felt some of the weird looks coming from people. Most of the people who worked at the inn knew Law well enough to realize he wasn't a psycho, even if they did think he was a little weird. But Roz, hell, Law considered her a friend. And this was what she thought of him? Lena, it's only 8:30. You can't leave. Want to bet? She asked, baring her teeth in a sharp smile. Lena, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. Upset me? Lena's jaw dropped. Snapping it shut, she took a slow deep breath, tried to get her temper under control. You think I'm upset? Roz, what I am is fucking pissed. Law's being treated like a pariah in this town because some psychotic pervert decided to fuck around with him. You should know him better. You're supposed to be his friend, but you actually think he could do that to a woman. You think he's capable of that. Lena, of course I don't. I don't really think he could kill somebody, Lena laughed. Even to her ears, the sound was cold, harsh, and brittle, as though it might break in her throat, shatter, cut, and choke her. Shit, Roz. Almost anybody could kill under the right circumstances. Self-defense, to protect somebody you love? I'd certainly try. But what happened to that girl? That wasn't killing. Ezra knew the details. He hadn't shared them all, but she'd pried a few of them loose. Besides, the grief, the rage she heard in his voice? That spoke more than any words possibly could. What happened to that girl is something only a monster is capable of, Lena said softly. And you stand there and make implications that Law, one of my best friends, could be that monster. One of your friends. But you're sorry. Damn it, Lena. What else do you want me to say? Roz shouted. A warm, furry weight pressed against Lena's legs and she reached down, rested a hand on Puck's head. His big body was tense, and she could feel his unease. He growled softly and she whispered to him, "It's okay, boy. Calm down. We're just pissed off." She couldn't do this around him. He was too sensitive to her moods and she didn't need him developing a dislike for one of her best friends. Although damn it, right now, she had a dislike for her best friend. Nothing, she said, focusing her attention back on Roz. You don't need to say anything. Damn it, Lena, Roz said. Spine rigid, Lena ignored the other woman as she heard the door to the kitchen open. Thank God, she thought. Grabbing Puck's leash from the hook, she crouched down by the door. It wasn't Ezra, though. It was Carter. Is everything okay in here? Just peachy, Lena snapped. Gripping the dog's leash, she rose and headed to the kitchen's north entrance. She'd wait for Ezra out in the lobby. Come on, boy. Are you okay, Lena? Carter asked. No. I've got a headache, I'm pissed, and I'm leaving, she said, biting off each word. It's not closing time yet. And we're dead in here. If somebody comes in, give them bar food, tell them I started puking all over the floor, I don't care, but I'm leaving, she said. Lena, I can see you're upset, damn it, if one more person called her upset, she was going to start gouging out eyes. Unaware of how close she was to screaming, Carter continued. I know we're friends, but you are an employee. Now if you're ill, I understand, But if not, what? She demanded scathingly. Lena, we need to talk about this, Roz said. The hell we do, she shouted. I'm not talking about this right now. Puck's growling grew louder. Shit. She was freaking her dog out. Lena, I don't know what the problem is, but you don't speak to my wife that way and you can't just walk out in the middle of your shift, either. And what if I do, damn it? Reaching down, she laid a hand on Puck's head. If I walk out that door, you'll what? Fire me? If that's what you need to do, then you do it, because I can't stay here another minute. If I do, I'll say something I'll regret. She didn't wait long enough for him to come up with an answer. What just happened? Gaping, Roz turned and looked at her husband. The misery on her face twisted at something inside him.